Hey guys, so I'm doing a little video on the cheetah doll, how I made the cheetah doll. So this was a little bit more work because I did the mouth open for this one, but this little one is available in my shop, christiannut.com. So this is just the normal regular cheetah. I'll give you a little look. It's got a really nice face. So head is polymer clay, feet polymer clay, all socket armature inside, faux fur with polyfill inside, so they can be fully posed. The patterns have been airbrushed, so if you want to know how I made this doll, keep watching and it'll take you through the whole thing. And also don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff at the end of the video. So that is my little cheetah doll, and I'll catch you later. Okay, so I'm starting out by making the inner mouthpiece, so it's sort of the gum area and the teeth and the tongue. So I'm using some Super Sculpey for the gum area because I want that sort of beigey undertone to it, and then I'm going to be using some translucent Sculpey to sculpt the teeth, and I'm only going to do a few teeth, so mainly the ones that you can see because they're not really going to have the mouth open very much, so there's no point going overboard with the details when you're not going to see them. So I'm just going to go ahead with the lower canines and a couple of teeth in the front, and then 2 on each side at the back because you're not going to see it anyway, so there's no point putting that work into making the all those details. So I'm going to do this and then preliminary bake it, and then I can work on the rest of the doll. And for the tiny little teeth, I'm just doing sort of breaking off little bits of the translucent Sculpey and working it into the gum line, just being careful not to create too much of a divot or digging into the clay too much. And I'm just doing 4 little teeth at the front to begin with. These are sort of fiddly, but you definitely need those front teeth for the details. And for the tongue, I'm just doing a small piece of Super Sculpey and shaping it into a rough tongue look, using my little ball tool to create the little ridge in the middle of the tongue, and then I'll add a little bit of the spiky, prickly details that you can see on cats' tongues. You can see how most of the details, like the teeth, are going to be covered with this tongue anyway, but yeah, like because the mouth isn't going to be open very wide, there's no point. So you can see this is basically what I've sculpted, and I'm going to bake it, and then I can start working on the lower jaw, which I will then add to the upper head. It's not a movable jaw this time. I did sort of toy around with that idea, but because I'm making 2 different cheetahs, I wanted to have 2 different sort of expressions, so I just went for just a mouth open version that can't be moved. Now for the rest of this sculpt, I'm going to be using Sculpey Original. That is the white softer clay. It's a little bit cheaper and it's a little bit softer to use. I like using soft clays because I work quite fast, so I like to spread the clay around basically with my fingers, and I find that really difficult to do with harder clay, so I like to use Sculpey Original. And I'm just covering a aluminium foil core with just a layer of the Sculpey and sort of roughing it out into a rough shape minus the jaw, because I'm going to be adding that. So you have to sort of make that calculation when you're sculpting things with a movable jaw or something with a bit more detail with the lower jaw, just to subtract that when you're sculpting the main part of the head. So I'm just basically bulking out just a rough, really rough shape of what I want the head to look like. Now I'm going to be adding the lower jaw to the position that I want. It's going to look really wonky here because you haven't finished the muzzle area, but you basically want to bring the jaw out a little bit to compensate for the extra details you're going to do on the muzzle area. So I'm going to be adding the sort of the lips that aren't touching as well, so I need to bring it out a little bit so I can put some clay over the top to create that muzzle area. Just creating the brow line. The cheetah has a sort of a harsh brow line, I guess, so I'm just quickly doing a rough shape of that and then start working on just blending in that lower jaw with some more Sculpey. Then I'm going to add a little bit of the nose. I always end up doing a lot of work on the nose. I don't know why, it just never turns out how I want it to at the beginning, so I always sort of get stuck on how I want the nose to look, but I always put it on as the first thing to do because it's the most pronounced part of the muzzle and you sort of need to have that there so you can start working on it a little bit better. But I always end up going back to it like a handful of times to just work on it a bit better and just get the detailing right. So I'm just going to quickly do a couple of nostrils with this one with my small needle ball tool and just sort of bring the nostrils into a rough shape to begin with. And now I can add the little lip area to the muzzle, so I'm just doing rough shapes of this one. I've rolled out 2 balls of clay roughly the same size, so I know I'm adding the same amount of clay to both sides, and then I'm just going to blend it in. And I'll obviously have to take some of this away because it's too large, but I always like to start out with a bit more, and then you can always just get rid of it or add more where you need to. And I'm just sort of blending it in with my nail here. Also doing a little bit of work on the inside of the mouth so it's not too messy. And I'm going to add the little waterline lip things. I did at the start, but I ended up blending it in just because it wasn't working for me. So I decided to do it once the jaw has been on. So I'm just blending it out a little bit and making sure I'm happy with the positioning of it. Now for the eyes, I've just made like a little divot where I want the eyes to be and adding a little bit of clay just to create like an eye socket, because the cabochons that I'm using have a flat back, so I end up doing like a little eye socket to make it protrude a little bit more, otherwise it just sits way too flat against the head. I find this works really well for using cabochons and just making sure the positioning is right and symmetrical. Otherwise it just ends up looking a bit wonky, and making sure that the pupils are sitting evenly. Then I can start working on the eyelids, so I just do that by rolling out a piece of polymer clay and just putting it over the top and just playing around with it to get a look that I'm happy with, and making sure that I'm getting the details right when I like where everything's sitting. His eyes are very tricky, especially on big cats, because they sort of protrude a little bit. The eyelids protrude a little bit and the eyes a little bit more inset. Once I'm happy with that, I can start adding some more detailing like the brows. I end up going over the eyes a couple of times just to make sure that everything's symmetrical and everything is lining up where it's supposed to be. So there's all tiny little differences between the big cats to make them look like what they're supposed to look like. So I've done a few big cats now, and they all have tiny little differences. Lions have like a big snout. Tigers also have quite a big snout as well. And cheetahs have a small head with like a really stark brow line as well. So they're all different to make sure they're all different. And yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm getting the details right. And when I'm happy with everything, I'm just going to start bulking out on all the areas that need a little bit more bulking. So it's usually under the eyes and around the back of the head as well before I start adding the ears and finishing the sculpt off. For the ears, I just roll out 2 bits of clay that are the same size, and then I shape it into a ear shape using my finger, and then I can add it to the head, making sure that I'm adding it symmetrically and they're sitting in the right spot. Usually the ears start halfway in the middle of the eye and then go around to the edge of the eye, so it's always a good indicator for where your ears should sit. I always have reference images on my computer next to me on all different angles to make sure I've got things sitting the way I want, and you can sort of move the ear around to get different expressions. Once that's done, I can start adding some little details like the fur. I don't add too much of this because I usually cover it with faux fur anyway, so I just do the edges that are really thin or aren't covered with faux fur. So around the eyes, the muzzle area, I just add a little bit of extra detailing. Alright, so once that's baked, this is what we have here. So I'm just going to do a quick colour on the upper palette, just in a little bit of pink, and then the rest I'm going to do black because they have sort of black mouths. So I'm not going to do too much pink on this one, just a little bit in the back of palette. I'm using water-based acrylic paints with this, and I'm just going to do a quick preliminary paint before I add the faux fur, and then I'm going to go over it again once I've added the faux fur. So just around the eyes, the nose, muzzle, mouth. I'm also going to do the cheetah lines, that like the tear lines that are running down, just so I know where they're sitting and I'm happy with the way it looks. Alright, so my neighbours decided to whip snip, but anyway, I'm going to start sculpting the feet for these. So I need to sculpt 8 pairs of feet for both cheetahs, so it's always a lengthy task sculpting feet. I don't really like sculpting feet, but that's just what has to be done. I'm going to be using translucent Sculpey for the nails because cheetahs don't have retractable nails, so that's sort of an important part of what they look like. So I added them while I'm sculpting, and I'm just going to bake it all in one. I'm not going to pre-bake the nails or anything. And then I'm going to give it a quick coat of paint using that water-based acrylic paint in black. For the armature, I'm using a 1/4 size ball and socket armature, so that's my medium size. I have plenty of this armature in my shop. I don't know, I think I'm sold out of the tool for it at the moment, but I do have the tool for the larger ones if you're interested. Christiannet.com if you are looking for somewhere where these armatures have coils. I have pre-made armatures, so there's plenty over there. So I'm just basically snapping the armature together. I've measured everything where I want it to sit, and just flexing it and bending it to a standing position, and then I'm going to be doing a round of pipe cleaners before I start needle felting, and this basically just means the fibre can stick to something because the armature is quite slippery, so the pipe cleaner basically catches the polyfill that I'm going to be using for the body, and it makes it so much easier to needle felt the body, and that just sort of acts as a muscle tone, so I can bulk the body out instead of doing what I used to do, was making the bodies and then stuffing it, which I find that this, you can achieve a better, more refined body when you do it this way. It does take a lot longer, but I just think it looks better. So I'm just going to needle felt away and come back when it's done. And now for the faux fur, I just do it basically a body piece to begin with, and I cut out a rough shape and then pin it together, and then I'll cut the where the legs are going to go and pin that together, and then sew everything up using ladder stitch. Sewing is so boring, so I'm going to fast forward all of the sewing, but I basically do the torso piece first and then sew that up and then add the legs once it's all sewn, and I can sew the legs together and also the neck piece, and then finally the tail piece. And for the sewing, I use a good quality thread because you need to have that tension when you're doing a ladder stitch to sew everything up, and that just basically makes a blind seam, and it's just something that you have to do when you're sewing things up like this. So definitely get yourself a good quality thread. So I'm going to fast forward on the sewing because it's boring. Okay, so everything's sewn up now, so I'm going to just give the neck area a little bit of a trim because there's a little bit too long, which is fine, but I just want to refine this neck area where I'm going to attach it to the head a little bit more. So I'm just cutting the extra fabric off, and then I'm going to be gluing it together using some tacky fabric glue, just to clear thick fabric glue that I get from a local craft store, and it's literally just like craft glue for fabrics, and it works really well adhering faux fur to either resin or polymer clays. Alright, so once that's done, I've added some faux fur to the head, giving everything an all-over trim. The trimming takes a long time, so basically I use a pet trimmer. I have a video, I think it's in my shop, on just tips on trimming faux fur, and I'm just doing a little bit of a cleanup before I add anything, and I'm just going to do bring out those features on the face, because sometimes it can get lost when you've added the faux fur. So I'm going to bring out those features again using some water-based acrylic paint, and just quickly mark over where I want those tear lines to be. I'm going to be doing the base colour in raw sienna. This is a water-based paint, so you can just mix it up with some water and add it to your airbrush. So I use an iWater airbrush. I can't remember the model. I can look if you're interested. But I'm just doing an all-over coat with that raw sienna colour on both these cheetahs, but this is the first one. And I'm just doing really lightly because I want some white to show through. And I started off by doing brush dots, but I ended up going for the airbrush at the end because I didn't like the way the dots looked with my brush, so I ended up going over it with an airbrush, and it looks so much better with an airbrush. So I think I'm just going to have to bite bullet and do most of my patterns with my airbrush these days, which wasn't too bad. It's just I can't be bothered cleaning the airbrush. So in the end, I think it looked really good after I'd gone over those dots and detailing on the face with the airbrush. I'm really happy with the way everything has turned out. Then I'm going to add the final details, which is some whiskers. I have the whisker tutorial in my shop if you're interested. And that's pretty much it for this little tutorial on how I made the cheetah. Like I said, this is available in my shop at creationsnet.com. Payment plans are welcome. So just shoot me a message and I can let you know how they work. I also have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok if you want to follow me on there and see what I do in my day-to-day life. But yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.